Hello everyone. Today we'll see what some concepts of what projectile motion. This topic is we have seen under what two-dimensional motion. There is what x and y components or the vertical and horizontal components. And this project okay sorry projectile motion is what it is the motion of an object. For that, when we say projectile, it is simply what an object that can be what launched or projected what in space without what the help of what or without any motive forces. And such projectile motion has their own what type. There is what horizontal projection, and there is vertical projection, and there is also inclined projections or projection of an object at an angle. And these concepts will be discussed under these lessons. And the first one is what when it comes to the projectile motion is simply it's what the motion of projectile in a space without what any motive force or any external forces. Under such question, there are some considerations. A resistance will be neglect or ignore, and also there's what different concepts that we have considered under these lessons. Okay, an object launched into what space without what motive power of what its own is called projectile. It is projectile simply we can say it is an object that can be launched in a free space. If we ignore air resistance or neglect air resistance, the only force acting on a projectile is its weight. If there is no air resistance, if there is no any drag force, therefore the only force acting on what this projectile simply this object we can say which is projectile motion, or which cause what it has to deviate from what straight lines. That is, but it makes what a curve which is known as parabola. Under this one, there is what horizontal. Horizontal, the projectile has what constant horizontal velocity and also a vertical velocity that changes uniformly under what the influence of what gravity. Look at from this, there is what horizontal component of velocity and there is vertical component of velocity under this motion of an object. But in the case of what projectile motion, there is what the horizontal velocity of an object must be constant. Since as we consider as we now we must consider what the air resistance will be zero, or we must ignore such factors. If there is no net force, there is no acceleration. Therefore, there is no change in velocity. Therefore, the horizontal velocity of an object must be constant. Since there is no acceleration, there is no forces or net forces. But the vertical component of what such objects would be changed due to what the effect of what acceleration due to gravity. Therefore, under this one, there is what a free-fall motion of an object. Look at consider such figures. From this one, there's what a projectile is simply it's an object that can be launched in free space. Look at if we project such objects or such projectile, it makes what such curves, which is known as parabola. This is a parabola. Therefore, this under this one, there is what vertical and horizontal components. We'll see what such graphically we must consider or we must draw this physical or diagram with what basic explanations. Look at from this one, there is the object is initially there is a velocity of what v, which is projected with a velocity of v, and having what two components, that is the vertical component of the velocity, which is v naught y, and also the horizontal component of velocity, which is vx. Under this graph, we have seen that this is the vertical the horizontal velocity vx, and there is what this is the vertical velocity of what the objects. Look at this is what large and this is what small, and at this point the vertical velocity of an object will be zero. but there is what horizontal velocity. There is what this is and this and this and this and this is equal in magnitude, since there is no acceleration or there is no air resistance or there is no any external forces acting on such objects. We must consider such parameters must be what constant or ignored. But the vertical velocity will be increase, decrease, and this one is 0. Initially, there is highest or large velocity, but gradually this velocity will be decreased. And finally, at this point, the vertical velocity will be 0. And then after this point, the vertical velocity will be increased gradually, since the gravity or the acceleration due to gravity is downward and the velocity also downward, therefore the velocity will be increased. And this is what we call the projectile motions. Projectile motion. Okay, and also this projectile has two or three, at least three type of projectile. The first one is what? Horizontal projection. If an object is projected horizontally, its motion can best be described by what? Considering its horizontal and vertical motions. Such motions are individual or independent each others. One cannot affect the others. And in this figure, we can see that the vertical velocity and the position increase within time as a source of a free falling body. We can see such terms: the flight time, and the position, and also the vertical and horizontal velocity of what the object can be determined under these lessons. Note that the horizontal distance increase what linearly with what time t, indicating a constant horizontal velocity. This is uniform motion in short. The horizontal projection of an object we can take as what? A uniform motions, since uniform motion can be determined or defined by what? Motion of an object in a straight line at constant velocity. As you have seen from this diagram, there is the object initially has horizontal motions or horizontal velocity only. Under this one, we can determine or we can distinguish from what vertical projection from the initial position of this one. Initially, there is no velocity, the vertical velocity of the object is 0. There is what? Only what? Horizontal velocity. And this horizontal velocity is, we have given that 150 meters per second. Still, this is also 150 meters per second, and this is also 150 meters per second. There is no change at all in horizontal motions. But after this point, the object can generate or can possess what? A vertical velocity of an object, which is this one is Vy, and there is what? It gradually increases. Therefore, this and also there is what? Height of an object, we must use minus, since there is what? The vertical component of an object. There is what? Vy, there is. This is what? The positive x-axis, and this what? This one is the negative y-axis. Since this is the negative direction of what? Vertical displacement, y or height of this object would be minus 1050 meters. All right. And also there's another example is perhaps since that this one is at is equal to 0, there's a horizontal velocity, and this horizontal velocity, but the vertical velocity of the object initially 0. Then after this point, the vertical velocity can be generated with and gradually increased. And but the horizontal velocity is still constant. And there is similarly, this can be taken as what? An example of what? Projectile motions at horizontal. And also under this horizontal motion, there is two dimension or two independent motions. That is a vertical motion and also horizontal motions. Under vertical motion, we must determine what the final velocity of an object and also what change in y or displacement. And there's what maximum height. We must simply what height of an object that can be generated from what initial positions. From this one, the vertical motion of what projectile that falls from what rest, there is what Vy f or final velocity of the vertical final velocity of an object is given by minus g times change. This minus can be generated due to what? The position of what an object is what minus g change in t, and also there is what since vertical motion there is projectile upward, and there is what the initial velocity of an object and the gravity is in opposite direction, since this minus can be generated from these concepts, and also the final velocity it may be what determined by this or this one of those equations can be used. If we have given the change in y, we can determine the final velocity using such questions or such equations. Or if we have given what, if we have not given the positions, we can determine the final vertical velocity of an object using what such equations. There is initially, since the motion is horizontal, there is free fall. There is what Vy not is equal to 0 meter per second. And also there is another horizontal motion of an object or projectile can be determined by Vx equals to Vxi, which is constant, yes, since there is no what acceleration. The ball is horizontal. Velocity remains what constant if air resistance is ignored or that is neglected. Example, let us see, this is one example at the horizontal produce motion in Royal George Bridge in Cornwall. Rise was 321 meters above the Arkansas River. Suppose you kick or little rocks horizontally off the bridge, and the rock hits what the water, so that the magnitude of the horizontal displacement is 45 meters. Find the speed at which the rock was kicked. Okay. This is what the velocity speed of what the rocks was kicked can determine. Under this one, there is what vertical velocity, there is y, and also there is a horizontal range, in short range, which is 45 meters. Therefore, change in y is equals to minus 321 meter, and also change in x equals to 45 meter, and ay is given already, but ax is 0. Therefore, Vx is equals to Vxi is equals to Vi, which is constant, since there is no what acceleration. Ax equals 0. Then Ay is equals to V, and also 9.81, which is given. There is naturally you can use what to simplify what mathematical expression. We use what 10 meters per second, but it is the same almost. Minus, then finally we have given what such expressions using what using this formula. This minus 45 meters. There's a range of these objects, and then we can determine such equations using this one. Okay, change in x, which is given by the change in x or xh. We have given range vh times t horizontal. In short, h is horizontal, x horizontal is equal to v horizontal times t. The horizontal displacement of what this object or distance is given by, so we must what figure out what the time to go to get the horizontal velocity. And the height of what the bridge is needed to calculate what the time of what flight for the rock. And x vertical is equal to half of what a t square, which is the vertical component of what velocity, which is xy, or we must x v, or we must simply y is equals minus 3 to 1 is equals to half of 1 minus g t squared times half of what minus g minus 9.8 t squared. Finally, t can be calculated by this one, and it's have given 8.09 seconds. And to insert the time back into what the original equations and solve for the vertical, the horizontal velocity of what such objects. We have given this is 5 point. This is insert this one from this one. We have given what these values. This all about today's. If it's interesting, please subscribe to inspire me. Thank you very much.